So I think what's very interesting in all of these presentations is this idea that came back was to create a dialogue with our customers, and I think that it became central in all of your presentations. So maybe the first question that I have is how can big data help us create that dialogue? How can we use big data to learn about our customers and then create and engage into a dialogue in your own experience in your different fields?
Well, I can start if you like in terms of, I guess that one of the points I was making was about the personal touch, if you like, the way to interact with someone. In fact, a lot of the ideas are logically based upon the old adage of a salesman talking to a customer. A salesman would try and find out a bit more about the customer in terms of does he have kids, is he married, etc., and then bring that back into the conversation later to create that bond. I mean, this is basically an extension of that. If you've got information about that customer that you can then put into the communication, you're creating that bond. So that personalisation aspect, I think, is the key to how to use that data and build up that conversation.
I think the other thing that we're starting to see with mobile as well is the whole sort of self-service thing. So, for people that want to be able to access, their financial accounts or whatever it is, whatever information, data you have on them, to be able to enable them to be able to do that, I think is going to be quite important as we move forward. I think that's why apps has moved so fast, because people don't necessarily want to go through a call centre that takes you through 15 different conversations before you talk to somebody, and you can do it on the fly. And we are, like Marie said in the beginning, we're connected all the time. And for me, that's incredibly important. I travel quite a bit, but it means that I can answer emails if I need to. I can get information exchange. I mean, the whole Barclays thing, the fact that you can ping, money, currency from one person to another, I think that's the first stage of what we're starting to see. So all of the data will inform not just the marketing, the message, but the products. And what those products might not necessarily be physical things. There could be other things. So.
I think from a data perspective, I think there's probably an implicit and explicit conversation you can have. So the implicit dialogue you have is the data that you have on customers can and should be used to respond to them. Now, actually, that isn't a dialogue in terms of me phoning a call centre, those sorts of things. It's like, based on what you know about me, you show me that you know me and are responding to me. And then I think there's probably more explicit dialogues that we're now having with customers in relation to, and I'd probably argue that a lot of the pull marketing that's done now that's customers saying, I want this, I'm here to consume this. So actually, whether that's information you've got, whatever it may be, that's, I think, where you can, again, without having humans as the actual point of dialogue, it's actually someone turning up to your business to say, hey, I'm after this, and actually how you respond is the dialogue that you create.
That's very interesting. Do you find that as customers get used to receiving personalized communication, their expectation of the relation they have with their brands changes? In other words, are we getting now a competitive advantage by using that big data, but as everyone is starting to use it, does it mean that we need to get even more creative? And if so, do you have any suggestions on how to be even more creative once people have been, let's say, used to receiving these targeted and personalized communications?
Yeah, I think that's quite an interesting one, because I think we do get bombarded. I mean, I've noticed that actually I get less direct mail now, but my email inbox is I flip through stuff very quickly. I don't necessarily delete it, because sometimes it's just quicker to just you just scan the subject lines and decide what you're going to read and what you're not going to read. So I think that you need to be able to look at both on and offline. It's the whole multi-channel thing to understand, how do I want to be communicated to as a customer? What's the preferred channel for me?
I think that's the critical point. I think as things go on, the bar's constantly being raised. So yes, you have to up your game to be competitive. Agree with that. And the second thing I think that's critical is the customer defines the way they want to be communicated to. So totally agree with your point in terms of direct mail has stopped, but it's now being replaced by a lot of email stuff. That's not the way I want to be communicated with. I've got important email in there, stuff coming in there, I ignore. But apps on my mobile phone. I've chosen to have a relationship with Starbucks. I've downloaded their app. They can communicate with me through there quite happily. So it's about, I think the bar is also raised then when you understand the customer, understand how they want to be communicated with, and exploit that channel.
I do worry quite a bit about mobile as well, as to, you know, if mobile would just follow everything else, where you just continually get pushed all these messages, because, you know, that to me is just useless. The whole point of having, in a way, apps is something that's very personalised to my communication with that company. So I decide, you know, when I open that app, that's the point at which I engage with that company. And I think that's the important thing, is to figure out what am I engaging through. So if you can get data out of that part, then you can service me better, rather than just keep pushing messages at me that I'm not interested in.
I definitely think the average is on the way up. You know, sort of rising tide lifts all boats. But I do think we've still got a long way to go to, you know, truly. You know, I think customer expectations are at a certain level, but actually I think there's still huge sort of shades of grey between people who do it well and people who do it poorly. And actually I think that, so I still think there's scope to differentiate by doing it and doing it well. And actually, as more media becomes more intrusive, if you like, you know, because I'd say, you know, something on my sort of front door is less intrusive than something in my inbox where I've got all my work emails, you know, to something even more intrusive on mobile. You know, mobile marketing, you know, I think the bar has to be so high. You know, great, because I was at the Open Mobile Summit a couple of weeks ago. You know, Twitter thought it was right because I was sort of looking at, you know, hashtag Open Mobile or whatever, that actually they would serve me the Carphone Warehouse ad. It's kind of like, you know, do I want a new mobile? It's like, well, no. Actually, so again, the context of the advert, the targeting, the data behind the advert and stuff, I think we've still got so much more to go. Yeah, and so I still think there's opportunity and headroom for competitive advantage there.
I think that brings in the conversation about relevance as well, in terms of the user. So just sending them something, if it's not relevant at that time, then absolutely it fails, it misses. Because it's interesting, that point where you were aware of that exhibition, it wasn't relevant, but if you're walking through the high street and walking past Carphone Warehouse, maybe at that point it would have been relevant just to prompt you. But so yeah, context and relevancy, I think, is another key thing.
I guess you've also got the new technologies like, you know, near field communication, NFC and RFID. So, you know, what a business is going to be doing that with that. You know, you're going to bombard my phone with something as soon as I move into the store, or you know, you're going to give me something useful, or you're going to let me choose, you know, when I engage or not. So.
Slightly different point, but something like Find My Friends is quite scary when you look at that map and see all these lights. We had this horrible feeling that the sales manager could set the sales team up in the same way, just have this giant screen in their office just seeing where all the salespeople are. Big Brother. And I think that's the danger almost, is that this technology then starts to go the other way around, and you start to feel it become very intrusive, and therefore it's not the way you want to communicate now, it's been forced upon you.
Now, I think it's all fascinating. I mean, it shows that how technology helps us to target our customers, but it's both an ally and an enemy if we don't know how to use it.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for that. Maybe the floor has got some questions to ask to our panel.
Hi, Minas Castanakis from ESCP Europe. Now, the assumption we made so far is that we can trace this data, get it, and use it. But with legal restrictions becoming more and more annoying for us, what is there for the future?
Yeah, I mean, that's quite a difficult one. I think.
Do you observe this effect already? Do you have any strategic, thoughts about what is going to happen?
Not really. I mean, obviously there's all the sort of issues around the EU cookie law, which I think, you know, most people have realised now, particularly in this country, that you can overcome that as long as you abide by certain rules, i.e. display the fact that, you know, you are capturing people's data. I think for businesses potentially, and that's why I had that slide about APIs, I think if you can choose the right partners for your business through API interactions, then, and obviously you're going to have to tell people that you're sharing data across those things, then I think that's slightly more secure, but yeah, it's a very difficult one to answer that one.
I personally, I believe the trend is set for the next decade, which is we as marketeers are going to have to get more transparent with customers and educate customers as to how data gets used. You know, whether that's through legislation because we have to, or actually because we want to empower consumers. And I think it goes back to the trust example, which is, you know, look how much Google invested in actually explaining to customers that they're changing their privacy policy to be able to bring together, you know, your Gmail, your search terms, you know, your Google Plus accounts, all those sorts of things. So I think there is an industry trend to say consumers expect, and it's contingent on us to, you know, for the practices that we want to, you know, the ways we want to use data to be more relevant, all those sorts of things. We've really got to work hard to educate consumers as to why, and actually hold our feet to the fire to say this is how it's going to be better for you, because otherwise they're going to be like, no thanks, I'm off.
I can see a stage where, you know, potentially everybody's data could be held in the cloud and you could manage what you let other businesses see. I've had that in my mind for quite a long time. It's just that today it's been very difficult for individuals to do that because you know you have to understand technology, you have to understand data security, all that sort of stuff. I think as we move forward, I can definitely see that as something. You know, I'll have a set of data fields that I can say, you know, well, I'm engaging with this company, so they can have the first 20 fields, and depending on the relationships I have with other companies, then I might open some of that up or not. But I think it's a way off yet.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Baker, Tongji University, Shanghai. You've been talking about the terabytes of data, and surely for the average consumer, the main effect is the sheer volume of data. And what I, as a parent, do is to teach my children to blank out 99.9% of what you guys are doing. And if I didn't do that, they'd just die. So why not focus on the 99.99% of what's actually happening, which is blanking out?
I mean, if I understand your question correctly, the thing that I find interesting, I've got two boys, one's 17 and one's 21, and they don't really care. They don't have any issues with data. They sign up for, you know, anything, don't really read the terms and conditions. So you think, for now, that's fine, but I do wonder in 10 years whether they'll think, what did I actually sign there when I was giving that data away? So I think there is some education to be done with, you know, younger audiences, customer bases specifically, about, you know, what it is that you're handing over. But I do think that as a nation of people, or, you know, across the globe, I think we will become more transparent because we understand some of the benefits. But it depends whether that's service orientated or whether it's marketing and message orientated. So
I think there's an assumption. Well, there's definitely malicious uses of data. You know, and we get lots of companies approaching us to say, well, we could plug this in here, and therefore we own the data. And I was like, what do you do with that data? Oh, well, we're going to go and sell it and stuff. And data brokerages and all those sorts of things, I think are. I think you have to be whiter than white in this day and age. So I still go back to having a very clear customer charter as to how it's going to get used and those sorts of things. And actually, kind of, I think you're right to say, if this was me getting used in that way, if this was my kids and that data was it, you know, how would you feel? Because there's so many examples now as to where data becomes sort of headline news that actually there's nowhere to hide. You know, and I think over the course of the next 10 years, you know, the finance scandals of today will get replaced with data scandals and stuff. You know, Target got caught recently in the last 6 months doing it, and it's kind of like we're going to have to, as an industry, make sure that, and as you know, the practices we're operating, okay, it might increase conversion rates and all that kind of stuff, but is it really ethical use of data? And I think that's actually a big trend that we need to, you know, as an industry, respond to.
I was wondering, you know, this transparency is now much more open. You know much more about me. Generation. This thing about gay marriage. I mean, gays always in existence, and now they're, you know, very, very out in the open. And I wonder if that's part of this, you know, general transparency we have.
Yeah, probably.
I think there's an interesting balance between voluntary giving information and the way we want to be communicated with. Go back to my point about you know, when you receive something that's been personalised, there's a good response to it. Well, they have to have that data to be able to have done that personalisation. So there has to be some giving to have the receiving. So there's a balance there. So I think this transparency is a key thing. I'm still one of those people, if something pops up and says, do you mind if we take data from you? I always pause. I think, what is it they're actually going to take from me? What might they use it for? Sometimes if it's sort of a Google thing in terms of what sites you're visiting, okay, that's okay. Other times, if it's a bank asking, etc., then I do pause. So I think there's this balance between giving and receiving, and how we want to have things come to us. We need to give something back then to enable that to happen. But we need to have a balance.
Maybe
One
you.
last question before we come to an end. I'm sorry, I'm being a bit of a cop here, but I think we need to.
Hi, I'm Sebastian of the MFK program. I was wondering, you see a lot of organizations collecting customer data, but you don't always see concrete customized solutions. Like, why are not all organizations utilizing the customer data they collect? What do you think prevents them from doing that?
Resource.
Yeah.
Plain and simply, I think that's probably what it is. Most of the time, it's resource and knowing what. I think this is the thing. We are going through a massive change. So what you have to realise is that a lot of people are, they benefit from the current structures of companies, and the only disruptor to that are the sort of pure play businesses. So until you start to see that change and they start to see the benefit of the data, that's not going to change. So I'm pretty sure that resource is one of the biggest.
I would agree with resource, yes. Look, often it comes down to cost, capability. I think it's also understanding, back to this point about things are changing rapidly. How well are people keeping up? I remember a few years ago when Twitter started, I mean, the confusion in the office in terms of what is this? How do we use it? It doesn't make sense for business. And now, a few years on, suddenly it's one of the big things we're focused on now in terms of creating those conversations. So there's a lag in terms of understanding, realising how these tools can be used before you can really get to start to use it properly and use that data.
And the tools and technologies. So now you're starting to see more of the sort of marketing automation type technologies coming out. Some of the tools for analysing data. So it's just a progression, really, maturity.
I think there's an important point there, which is it seems to me if you're going to ask specific questions of your customers, you're telling them that you want to have this sort of trust relationship. If you're not going to use the information, you're in a way you're breaking that trust.
You are. Yeah.
You're saying, I got something from you that I don't find valuable enough. So I think there's a real lesson there for marketers to don't ask questions unless you're really going to use the information.
Yeah, I think that's the key point. I mean, it's like being an exhibition and having a huge list of questions to ask people, just put into a database. In that Maybelline conversation, there was a deliberate output where the user could absolutely see with the information they gave what was given back to them and the relevance and the link to it. So, totally agree with your point.
I'm afraid we're going to bring this panel to a close. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.